Hello class. I put these videos together because we're doing a day of factoring practice, and I know it's been a while since we've done straight factoring. When we come back on Wednesday, we're going to be covering some solving with factoring, so we decided to put a day in a factoring practice. And instead of leaving you guys to do it all on your own, I went ahead and I'm going to record this video so that you guys can see how to do all of the different methods again, and then you can work through the problems on the back of this worksheet on your own. So follow along with the video, make sure you copy down some notes, pay attention, and then when I'm back on Wednesday, if you have questions, you can ask them then, but you'll have lots of problems to work through. And again, this is review. So we're going to start with guess and check. So x squared minus 10x plus 16. Usually we used guess and check when you had no number in front, but you can also use guess and check when you have a number in front. So when we have something like this, a trinomial, we're going to factor into two binomials. So we set up our two sets of parentheses here. And our two binomials, remember, you would multiply everything by each other in order to get back to the trinomial. So we think to ourselves, what is going to go first? And that first thing has to multiply to x squared. So the only two things that multiply to x squared are x times x. What goes last must multiply to a positive 16. So we need things that multiply to 16. So that could be 1 times 16. That can be negative 1 times negative 16. We've got 2 times 8, negative 2 times negative 8, and 4 times 4, or negative 4 times negative 4. Some of you have gotten away from making this list, but those of you that are struggling with factoring still, I think you need to go back to making this list. What we checked next was this negative 10, and we wanted to look for which ones of these factors add together to negative 10. So I think you can see it right here. It's a negative 2 and a negative 8, and so that's how we fill this in as a minus 2 and a minus 8. And this right here is our factorization. So it's completely factored. Going on to the second one here, we have x squared minus 8x plus 15. Feel free to work ahead of me if you think you understand this, just to make sure, and you can check as you go. But I make two binomials here. Again, I'm looking for what multiplies to this x squared. Remember, if there's a number in front, like if it was a 3x squared, then obviously I'll have to have a 3x and an x. But because it's just x squared, we have an x and an x. We need things that multiply to 15, so that's 1 times 15, or negative 1 times negative 15. 2 times nothing, 3 times 5, or negative 3 times negative 5. So there's our list. With a negative 8 as our option, we're looking for the ones that add to negative 8, which is right here. We put in a minus 3 and a minus 5. Remember, if this number is negative, you'll have negatives and positives over here because you need things that multiply to a negative number in that case. But this is our factorization here. So that is the guess and check method. The next method we're going to cover is the box method. And we started discussing the box method when we started discussing trinomials that had a number in front, an a value in front. So we're going to make a box. And remember, we work our box backwards in this case. We're not multiplying. So we're trying to figure out what goes on the outside, and we know what goes on the inside. So we know we put a 3x squared here. You always put your first term in the first place, and a negative 8, and you put that in your last box. We also know that we want these two boxes here to add together and make a 10x, a positive 10x. So whatever we do as we go through this, we want those to add together to make a positive 10x. So I'm going to start with the 3x squared because there's only two things that multiply to 3x squared, and that's 3x and 1x. So it doesn't matter where I put those. I'm going to put the 3x here and the 1x here, or you could just put x. You don't have to have the one with it. And now I'm going to look for things that multiply to negative 8. So negative 8 is going to be 1 times negative 8, negative 1 times positive 8, 2 times negative 4, negative 2 times positive 4, and I think that's all that we have there. Now, looking at this list, you're not going to find something that adds to 10x. And the reason being is because you are going to multiply one of those numbers by 3x to get this number, and the other number by 1x to get this number. So you kind of have to guess and check. So I'm going to be erasing some things as I do this, so if you want to follow along and then fill it in, you can. If let's say I went with the first one, if I went with a 1 here and a negative 8 here. So negative 8 times 1 does make this negative 8 here. Then I need to multiply to get these. So this is going to be a negative 8x because I'm doing negative 8 times 1x. And this one is all the way to the left of it is 3x times 1. which is 3x. Clearly does not make 10x. So we're going to go backwards here, and that didn't work. Now, you could always have those same numbers in the opposite order and have them this way. So then I would do 1x times 1, which is just a 1x, and 3x times negative 8, which is negative 24x. And that is a lot different than a 10x in that case. So we know we're getting rid of that one, and that did not work. So we can go back here and get rid of those numbers, and I can cross that option off. Now, we want to try to guess and check a little bit better than that. Obviously, the 1s and the 8s, they were pretty far away, so usually if you pick the one on the other side, it's not going to be the same. If something came out to be negative 10x, or it came out to where it looked like it was going to get to 10x, sometimes if you switch the signs, you'll get to the right thing. But that didn't happen, so we're not going to go with these. We're going to go on to the 2s and the 4s. And I'll start with the last set here, negative 2 and positive 4. And if I go here and here, 1x and 4 makes a 4x, 3x and negative 2 makes a negative 6x. That's a negative 2x. It looks like it's going to make 10x, okay? So I possibly could change the signs and make this positive and this negative, but yet again, it didn't fulfill what we wanted. So we've got to try something else then. So we can go back here. And let's try our negative 2 and our 4 in the other order. So a negative 2 here and a 4 here. And again, negative 2 times 4 does make negative 8. So 1x times negative 2 is negative 2x, and 3x times 4 is 12x. And you can see finally that we did find something where negative 2 and 12 does make 10, and so we picked the right numbers. Now the last step in this one is to actually write the factorization, which is what's on the outside. So it is an x plus 4, because that's a positive 4, and a 3x minus 2, and that's your factorization there. Okay, if we go on to do the box method down here, and our boxes in this case are always going to be 2 by 2 boxes, or 4 boxes within the grid. We're going to put the 4y squared in here. We're going to put the 3 down here. I challenge you to try to see if you can do this one. Now this one's a little tricky because your 4y squared could be a 2y times a 2y, or it could be a 4y times a 1y. And so you have to pick which one that's going to be. And remember, we never deal with negatives in the front because we can always deal with them in the back end. So we don't put any negatives on these. We have these two options though. And it's kind of up to you to try to pick and choose. The nice thing though is that 3, we either have 3 times 1 or negative 3 times negative 1. And with a positive 8, usually you're not going to be using negatives. So since everything's positive, we're going to go positives. So 3 times 1 are our options. So I can just pick where I want those to go. And so that stuff's all pretty solid. 3 times 1 does make the 3, and I have to fill these boxes in. Do remember that these boxes here are going to, in the end, add up to 8y. And so now we're just trying and we're fitting the rest of this in. And we only have a 2y and a 2y, or a 4y and a 1y. So let's start with this because it doesn't matter where I put them. So if I go 2y and 2y, I multiply. 2y times 3 is 6y. 2y times 1 is 2y, and I guess I picked the right one in the first place, so that is the correct one there, because 6y plus 2y does make 8y. As soon as you see that, again, write your answer because you are factoring. 2y plus 1 times 2y plus 3, and that is the factorization of 4y squared plus 8y plus 3 by the box method. Okay, remember this is just a method that you can choose. You do not have to choose this one. The next method we have here is the master product method, or the AC method, and we call it the AC method because you take the A term and the C term and you multiply them together. So 9 times negative 8 is a negative 72 in this case, and we are looking for things that multiply to negative 72 and add to 6. So you can make your list. Now 72 is going to be a pretty long list, but I can kind of start in the middle and kind of cross things off by knowing that I want it to add to 6. Like 1 and 72 obviously aren't going to make a 6. 2 and 36 not going to make a 6. So we need something that's closer together. And in this one, I know that 6 times 12 makes 72. Now notice 6 times 12 makes a positive 72. I need a negative. So I need one of these two to be negative. And if I want a positive 6, I want the bigger number to be positive and the smaller number to be negative. If I recheck that, yes, they multiply to negative 72 and add to 6. So these are the numbers I want. Now with the master product method, what we did was we split up our middle term. So we're going to write our first term and our last term exactly the same, so I just brought those down, and our middle term, which is a y term, is going to have these two numbers on it. So it's going to be a negative 6y and a positive 12y, and it doesn't matter which order you write those in. It will make a difference in the next step, but your last step will all be the same. So this is how we redo it. Make sure that the term that's here and here has the same variable as the first one, because this plus this should be equal. These two lines are equal to each other. Now I factor by grouping. So I group this set and I group that set and I factor. So I have a 9 and a negative 6, which each are divisible by 3, and a y squared and a y, so they're both divisible by y. They both have at least one y in them. So we divide. 9y squared divided by 3y. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Y squared divided by y has 1y left over. Minus, put that minus sign in there, 6y divided by 3y. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. Y divided by y, it goes away. So there's my end of my parentheses there. Do the same thing on this side. So since it starts with a plus, it's going to be plus. If it started with a minus, remember you always take out a negative. So 12 and 8, I'm looking at that, and I think they both are divisible by 4, so that's what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to take a 4 out. 8 doesn't have a y on it, so we're not going to take a variable out. So 12y divided by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and the y stays. Negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2, and so we leave that. And what you should notice is that your two parentheses come out to be the same. Remember, at this point, the reason that we can do our next step is that this term here is one term in the problem, and this is one term, and they have a greatest common factor. Each of those terms has a 3y minus 2 that we can factor out, and if you factor it out, you have a 3y left, and if you factor it out here, you have a plus 4 left. And this is my factorization by the master product method in this case. If we go on to the second problem here and do it by master product, we're doing 5 times negative 27, which is a negative 135. This one might be a little tricky, so you might want to use your calculator to test some. What I would do is I'd start at 1. Divide by 1, you get 135, doesn't make a 42. Divide by 2, it doesn't divide. If you divide by 3, you get 45. 3 times 45, that sounds pretty close. And yes, I'm going to be able to make a negative 42 from that. Now, since I want this to be negative, I want the bigger number negative and the smaller number positive. So recheck it. That still multiplies to negative 135, and yes, it adds to negative 42. So those are my numbers. Again, I write my first term down just as is. I write my last term down as is, and I write my middle two terms in here. Again, it doesn't matter the order. I'm going to put the negative 45a, because there was an a on this, plus 3a in here. Group. So these are my groups here, and then we're going to factor. So a greatest common factor here, the 5 and the 45 are both divisible by 5. A squared and a, you always take the smaller of the two, so there's just one a in that one, so we take that one out. And we're going to do our leftovers. So 5 divided by 5 is not 0, just as a reminder there. 5 divided by 5 is 1. A squared divided by a is a. So we have a 1a minus 45 divided by 5 is 9. A divided by a means that the a goes away. Here, again, it starts with a plus, so we're going to do plus 3 and 27. Yes, they're both divisible by 3, so we're going to take that away. 3a divided by 3 is going to leave the a. Negative 27 divided by 3 is going to be a negative 9. And you can see again that they did share that term. So my final answer is I take my a minus 9 out, and my leftovers here are 5a plus 3. And that is my factorization by the master product method.